Welcome to Clandestine Cases. Before we dive into today's twisted mystery, Miss Marple, the empty chair at Lavender Hall, hit me up. What made you smile today? And where in the world are you listening from? I'm featuring your stories in the next drop, so don't be shy. Now grab your tea, dim the lights, and get ready. Because nothing in Whispers in the Fog is ever what it seems. Chapter 1. The Chair in the Shadows. The storm raged outside Lavender Hall, a tumultuous cacophony of wind and rain that rattled the century-old windows and sent branches scraping against the facade like skeletal fingers clawing for entry. Inside, the opulent drawing room was cast in a shroud of velvet shadows, flickering candlelight, playing tricks with the heavy drapes of crimson brocade. A low murmur of voices filled the room, punctuated by an unexpected, shrill scream that pierced the cozy atmosphere like a shard of ice. It was the voice of Lady Agnes Worthington, ghostly white in her silken evening gown, pointing a trembling finger towards the new addition that loomed in the corner like a malignant spirit, an ornate mahogany chair. "What in heavens have you done, Archibald?" she gasped, her eyes wide with horror. Archibald, Lord Worthington, a stout man with thinning hair and an agitated manner, nervously wiped his brow. "It's merely a chair, Agnes. One we've commissioned from the finest craftsmen. The artisans in Bristol are renowned for their cursed curios, you mean?" She spat back, her voice trembling as she recalled whispered tales of furniture imbued with malign energy, remnants of past tragedies. "Do you not know the tale of the Van Muir chair?" Miss Marple, perched in her familiar armchair, crimson fabric worn threadbare, calmly observed the commotion from beneath the brim of her hat, intrigued by the undercurrents of fear swirling amidst the tenuous civility of the gathering. She had joined the Worthingtons for an evening of camaraderie, only to find herself faced with an unsettling spectacle in which light turned to shade and polite conversation gave way to mounting dread. Her sharp eyes flitted about the room, taking in the expressions of the assembled guests, each taut with uncertainty and perhaps something unspoken that lay beneath the surface. "That old wives' tale," said Vincent Galbraith, a dashing but cynical writer, known for his biting wit. "It's sheer superstition, my dear Lady Worthington. We all know the gripping charm of a good story is purely in the telling. Why, I dare say there's little that a well-crafted chair could do to—" "Enough of this," Lady Worthington interrupted, her voice quaking with emotion. "You must remove it. It holds no place in our home." As she spoke, Miss Marple noticed the peculiar twitch of Lord Worthington's mouth. A fleeting snarl of tension crossed his features before he quickly masked it beneath a facade of calm. It was the first key that suggested all was not well. She leaned forward, eyes honing in on the chair, where the shadows pooled ominously, as if the very darkness were drawn to it. A sudden crash echoed from somewhere deep within the manor, a loud, unsettling sound that sent a ripple of shock through the gathering. The chatter faded as heads turned toward the archway like a flock of startled birds. At that moment, Henry, the Worthingtons' elderly butler, appeared at the threshold. His eyes were wide, panic-stricken. "My lord, we've lost power to the entire East Wing." Within the chamber, nerves frayed like the fringes of a time-worn blanket. Miss Marple's gaze darted back to the hidden corners of the room. In that instant of uncertainty, she felt the faintest of chills crawl along her spine, not from the cold, but from the sensation of something amiss, a darkening undercurrent weaving through the splendid thread of opulence. "Truly a night for old fables," Vincent said, with a weak smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "The shadows have grown long, and tales of the Van Muir chair will be the least of our troubles." "Stories are often rooted in truth, Mr. Galbraith," Miss Marple chimed in softly, drawing attention. "You see, folklore has a peculiar way of preserving the unspoken fears, does it not? It is not merely what rests on the chair that matters, but what has lingered around it." "And what might that be, Miss Marple?" asked Seraphine, a distant cousin with tightly pinned curls and an anxious demeanor. Miss Marple smiled, a glint in her eyes, a signal of gears turning in her mind. "Regrets, perhaps, secrets long buried. It is said that every piece of furniture carries with it the energy of those who have once held dominion over it." "Or a curse," Lady Worthington whispered, clenching her fist as if to ward off a falling shadow. "Archibald, you must get rid of it. It unsettles me." When she turned to her husband, however, the corners of Archibald's mouth twitched with irritation, a hint of something darker flickering beneath his genial facade. "And throw away a fine piece of craftsmanship? Hardly seems prudent. We are honorable stewards, after all." Just then, a loud thud resonated from the hallway, followed by a piercing scream, one that drowned out all rationality. The guests stared wide-eyed, clamping hands to their mouths as if to stifle the horror consuming them. Lady Agnes staggered backwards, colliding with the edge of the chair. And then it happened. A figure in white fled across the dim hallway, almost translucent against the wall. With flipping hearts and gasps filling the air, the atmosphere turned dense, stifling with implications. "Who was that?" cried Vincent, breaking the silence, his eyes wide with confusion. Miss Marple, unyielding in her observation, instinctively turned towards the mahogany chair, now drenched in an eerie stillness. The gravity of the moment pressed upon her, an unsettling realization creeping into her mind. Just as something haunted the chair, there existed a darker secret hiding amongst them, and it all revolved around one particularly pallid figure, strangely absent from the gathering. "Good heavens!" gasped Lady Worthington as she looked back toward the hall. "Is anyone here?" But the only reply was the echo of silence, a silence that seemed to carry a whisper. Something was about to shatter, and before Miss Marple could make her next deduction, there came a loud crash from the far end of the room, a candle tipped, flames licking hungrily, casting wild shadows that danced ominously against the walls, flickering to life like specters of the past. In that moment of chaos, Miss Marple's mind spun into overdrive, but not fast enough to avoid the scream cutting through the air once more, reverberating with a chilling finality, sealing her in this web of uncertainty and lurking treachery, as the night unfurled its darkest intentions. Chapter 2. Whispers Among the Roses. The tranquil morning was torn asunder by a bone-chilling scream that reverberated through the lush gardens of Lavender Hall, slicing through the morning mist like a knife. Birds scattered from hastily disturbed nests, their anxious cries mingling in the air with the unearthly echo. Miss Marple, who had been examining a particularly splendid rose, its deep crimson hue shimmering like blood beneath the heavy dew, shuddered as the sound punctured the serene atmosphere. She rushed towards the source, her heart racing faster than her feet as she rounded a hedge adorned with climbing blooms. Lady Agnes Worthington stood in the middle of the gravel path, her face blanched against the riot of colors surrounding her. Beside her lay a small gathering of villagers, huddled together, their expressions twisted in horror. Beneath their anxious murmurs, Miss Marple detected a discordant note, fear interwoven with something darker, perhaps guilt or even resentment. "What has happened?" she inquired, her voice calm yet probing, cutting through the chaotic whispers. "Edith," Lady Agnes gasped, her hands fluttering to her throat as she gazed at the ground. "They found her near the old oak tree. Her voice faltered, the weight of her words tremulous. "She's gone. A terrible accident. They say she fell." A shiver coursed through Miss Marple as she knelt beside the scene. The sight before her was tragic indeed. A young woman, striking in life, with a spirit that touched those around her, lay lifeless, the morning sun casting an unforgiving light upon her still form. Yet something felt amiss, a disturbance beneath the veneer of grief that cloaked the villagers. Gently, she lifted Edith's delicate hand, examining the slender fingers. A narrow band of chipped pink nail polish encircled the nails, an unlikely detail to overlook in such somber moments. More intriguingly, a finely etched brooch glittered in the corner of her vision. A vintage piece shaped like a rose. Miss Marple recognized it. It belonged to Lady Agnes, a cherished family heirloom. "This is serious," she murmured to herself, aware the others were watching her every move, their expressions a kaleidoscope of trepidation and disbelief. How could a casualty of such nature find its way to this garden? As the villagers whispered among themselves, Miss Marple listened keenly, piecing together fragments of speculation. It was Lord Worthington's insistence on hosting that ridiculous flower contest, Vincent Galbraith murmured bitterly, always so keen to show off, even at the cost of his guests. Lady Agnes shot him an incredulous look. "You dare to imply it was Archibald's fault, Vincent?" Vincent scoffed, his demeanor drenched in scorn. "You must admit, Agnes, Edith was never the most adept at gardening." "Competing against you," Seraphine chimed in nervously. "I wonder how she thought she stood a chance." Sparks of animosity crackled between them, a palpable tension igniting the air. Miss Marple noted how quickly the undercurrents of jealousy surfaced amidst the fervent expression of sorrow. Petty grievances flourished like the roses in bloom around her. "Is it possible this was not an accident at all?" Miss Marple interjected softly, her gaze flicking from face to face, weighing the implications of their words against the tragic tableau before her. Gasps rippled through the gathering, the atmosphere thickening with suspicion. "Nonsense," Vincent protested, raising a hand dismissively, though the way he shifted his weight suggested unease. "Of course, it was an accident. Don't be absurd, Miss Marple." "Accidents do happen, it's true," she replied, meeting Vincent's gaze squarely. "But the question I ponder is whether one's motives can sometimes lead them to unfortunate choices." "Yes." The words hung in the air, a subtle reminder of the thin veil of civility that draped their interactions. Each passerby wore a mask, and Miss Marple was uncharacteristically uneasy. There was a hint of something more sinister, lurking behind the veil of polite concerns. Just as she began her quiet interrogation of each gathered villager's expressions, a shrill voice broke through. "Lady Agnes, Henry the butler has returned," cried a housemaid who skittered out of the shadows. "I thought he was tending to matters inside," Lady Agnes replied sharply, clearly flustered by the commotion. "Henry," she called, her voice tinged with anxiety. The elderly butler appeared, haggard and breathless, as if he had just sprinted a marathon through the rolling hills of the estate. "Forgive me, my lady, I bear news." He paused, wiping sweat from his brow with a shaking hand. "The power outage, it is odd, but now I fear it has returned. We are without light in the east wing. But that's not the worst of it. What ails you, Henry? Lady Agnes pressed, her composure faltering, as dread loomed in her eyes. There's been commotion in the library, he stammered. Something was disturbed. It's all jumbled, and I found the bookcase open. It seems someone has not only wandered our halls, but rummaged through our belongings. The revelation sent a ripple of alarm through those gathered. Miss Marple's mind flashed back to the chair's ominous presence and the unspoken shadows lurking within the hall. The manor had secrets, that much was clear, and Edith's demise, now wrapped in the chilling enigma of theft, transformed the scene entirely. I think you may have just stumbled upon the heart of our mystery, Miss Marple stated, her voice steady, though her heart raced. She turned towards the butler, her thoughts racing as citrusy scents of the nearby roses mingled with the earthy dirt beneath them. But the question is, who has been stirred to unrighteous cause? Amongst the ebbing circle of murmurs, eyes darted nervously, fears blossomed into whispered accusations. With every perception, nuances of motive unveiled themselves as no one's gaze met anyone else's with certainty. A sudden commotion erupted behind them. Another shriek, a candle set ablaze at the edge of the garden, flames licking hungrily as the conflagration rose into a furious display against the looming shadows. "Will someone extinguish that?" Lady Agnes cried, now practical cries tinged with fear. But Miss Marple stood immobile, an unsettling realization piercing through her. "You cannot flee from the warmth of your secrets," she remarked, a hint of melancholy lacing her voice. Then, with precision, Miss Marple's shrewd mind narrowed upon one key figure in the circle, solidifying her suspicion. But just as she assembled the pieces, a figure burst from the garden's edge, barreling through the crowd, a pale silhouette that flashed fear before disappearing as suddenly as the taste of dust on a hot day. The atmosphere thickened as all eyes turned toward the silence that followed. And just like that, a calm facade shattered amidst a rising tide of turmoil, leaving Miss Marple gripped in a sudden grasp of urgency. Time was short, and the stakes had escalated. Someone was privy to dangers lurking closer than suspected, and before the day's end, she feared blood would stain the roses. Chapter 3: The Locked Room Puzzle. The thunder struck sharply, a reverberating crack that sliced through the dense silence of Lavender Hall, jolting its inhabitants awake to the horrors that pressed ever closer. Shadows writhed along the polished corridors, flickering against the painstakingly wallpapered walls as the electric storm raged outside. In the darkness, a voice echoed, a scream, piercing and full of terror, ricocheting through the atrium and pulling Miss Marple from her quiet musings amid the chaos of scandal and death. "It's in there," a frantic whisper carried through the hall, layered with layers of panic. Rushing towards the source, Miss Marple felt an icy shiver skitter up her spine, her mind racing ahead. The guests shuffled close, faces taut with confusion and fear, escalating the pandemonium gripping the house. As they gathered, the rigid door of the drawing room stood ajar, one corner marked with a curious slip of light. "Sir, Lady Agnes, you must come, quickly." The voice belonged to Sarah, the housemaid, whose wide eyes mirrored horror itself. Pushing through the huddled figures, Miss Marple moved towards the door, her heartbeat a steady thrum in her ears, quickening as she entered the room. The sight within demanded her full attention. There, sprawled beneath the grand piano, lay Vincent Galbraith, his pallid face twisted in an expression of inexplicable fear, lifeless, with one hand pinned beneath the beast of a musical instrument. The air, thickened with the tang of stale cigar smoke and the unmistakable aroma of leather, grounded and oppressive, almost suffocating. Yet what seized her attention almost instantly was the room's unsettling configuration. The door was locked from the inside, bolted shut, with no apparent means of egress for whoever had just committed this gruesome act. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, her mind signaling a myriad of questions. How could this be? He can't be dead, Lady Agnes gasped senselessly, her voice thin, a feeble echo in the otherwise muffled room as she stumbled forward, her previous authority now utterly stripped. We were all here. We heard him just moments ago. Moments ago, indeed. Miss Marple turned sharply, confronting the aggrieved crowd. And yet none of you saw who entered afterwards. A nervous murmur rippled through them. With each passing second, tension escalated. Every resident of the house became a potential suspect, each stranger harboring a darkness that threatened to surface. His cocktail glass, Miss Marple observed, positioning herself near the bar. It stands full, untouched. She turned back, noting how the glint of the chandelier reflected fluctuating shadows. A man of drink wouldn't let it remain this way. What indeed did you hear? Vincent was speaking of Lady Worthington. Seraphine spluttered, her complexion wan in the dim light. He had some foul words, making comments regarding Edith's death. Then, foul words, Miss Marple interjected, anticipating the ensuing chaos. A lesson for all those gathered here, if I may suggest. Secrets provoke, she continued, glancing between their startled expressions. Perhaps one too many veiled criticisms danced about the atmosphere, turning our dear Mr. Galbraith into a target. Isn't that so? No, I wasn't, Lady Worthington proclaimed defensively, her usually composed demeanor now rattled. I thought that he would speak no more. Oh, how often one underestimates a man's resolve, especially when there is poison behind their words. What do you hide from me, Lady Worthington? Miss Marple's voice dripped with purpose. A silence fell, a web woven of fear and disbelief as Lady Worthington's facade crumbled momentarily, vulnerability seeping through her perfectly manicured exterior. He deserved no pity, Miss Marple. You cannot fault me for wanting to be rid of a man who meddled in our affairs. She clenched her fists, her knuckles whitening. It was not my intention, I swear it, but I'd never harm him with my own hands. Now, we're all wreathed in tangled webs already, my lady, Miss Marple continued, her keen mind framing the pieces into clarity. What about you, Lord Worthington? How exactly were you occupied this very evening? You were quite visible not a moment ago, stuffing papers behind that desk, yet I trust you have noted the utter chaos now in this very room. Archibald Worthington met her gaze steadily, a ghost of irritation flickering briefly in his eyes. If you mean I had my hands quite full, with other matters that required attending to, matters involving that cursed chair, perhaps, she interrupted. Or was it merely the fear of something worse lurking? After all, secrets are indiscriminate with whom they haunt. A low murmur of agreement rippled through the group. Nobody was spared. The accusation hung in the air like a dark cloud, overshadowing the increasingly tumultuous emotions vibrating amongst the assembly. A shared realization settled over them. This was no ordinary murder scene, and with a locked room, the specter of betrayal whispered through every heart, seeking to entice confessions, perhaps even very lives. Let us remain calm, A tragedy graces us, and if Mr. Galbraith did not permit himself the entrance into the realm of unseemly death willingly, how can we deduce by which hands it was allowed? Miss Marple insisted, knit brows betraying barely contained agitation. As she spoke, a faint sound heralded from the hall, an odd scrapping noise, furtive, followed by hurried footsteps. "Ah, but I sense a new flourish to our act," Miss Marple concluded. "Henry," she beckoned, feeling the tang of trepidation twist within her stomach. Moments later, the elderly butler appeared, his frail frame trembling, eyes wide as he surveyed the scene, pausing when he caught sight of the locked door. "My lady, I came simply to inform that the body of Lady Worthington's missing shawl was reclaimed from the library." Shawl? Miss Marple's senses tingled with that word, a clue sharp and cut deep, layering the tension anew. "You see," she murmured, gaze flicking back toward the form of Vincent. "This is no locked room. It is merely an open invitation for the truth to flow, yet we must find the key." Just then, a sudden commotion erupted. The door flung wide. A rush of air swept through, a figure colliding against the remaining guests, dashing back through the threshold. A figure, draped in white, their face hidden beneath that veil of secrecy. A small gasp rose before terror seized the room again, creating a taut silence into which the atmosphere drew back, charged and electric. In this moment, time itself seemed to stutter, and Miss Marple felt the shadows of suspicion clasp around her heart, each pulse also fastening itself tighter. The thread had finally been pulled, unraveling terror in its wake, yet she feared whatever was to come would be bared amidst a locked doors and hidden motives far darker than she could foresee. And so, as the chilling echo of silence reopened in its dominion, she realized the curse of Lavender Hall was far from broken. Teetering precariously at the brink of darkness, waiting to swallow them whole. Chapter 4. The Missing Will. A thunderous crack lit the night, a jagged flash that illuminated the figure of Sarah, the housemaid, as she stumbled into the dimly lit atrium, her cheeks pale and haunted. "Miss Marple, the study," she gasped, fear flickering in her eyes as if caught in a web of despair. Behind her, the shadows of the manor seemed to elongate, creeping with malicious intent. As if by an unseen hand, the heavy air pulsed with ominous energy, and the distant rumble of the storm felt prophetic, a herald of chaos unleashed. Without hesitation, Miss Marple followed the maid through the grand hall, the echoes of their footsteps swallowed by the oppressive atmosphere. A deep sense of dread pooled in her stomach. They burst into the study only to be met with an unsettling scene. Papers lay strewn across the polished oak desk, chaotic remnants of what had once been a sanctuary of order. Lord Worthington's expansive library, normally a bastion of quietude, now radiated an unsettling tension, each shadow whispering secrets of things long buried. "Miss Marple, the will," Sarah stammered, eyes darting toward the towering bookcase as if it harbored a villain lurking in the shadows. "It's gone. We must find it." "Gone?" Miss Marple's brow furrowed, her mind already racing. "Or hidden, perhaps. A crucial document. And yet it seems as if someone has taken intentional care to make its absence known." She took a step toward the desk, noting the inked quill tip lying haphazardly, still glistening with freshly dried ink, a hint of urgency mingling with the disorder. "What do you know of this?" The maid's lips trembled, a telltale sign of her fraying nerves. "I overheard the late lord speaking of a new will just days before. Before he passed, he had reservations regarding his heirs. It seems the inheritance was no longer as straightforward as it seemed. Famously complicated business, inheritance, Miss Marple mused, her eyes sparkling with a sudden clarity as she began to piece together fragments in the tapestry of intrigue. Perhaps someone in this very room has a great deal to gain, and just as much to lose, if that were to resurface. Lady Agnes entered then, her aristocratic composure now marred by a flicker of unease. "What are you both doing here? The storm rages, and in this dreadful pallor, one might think you'd lost your senses. Lady Agnes, the will of your late husband has gone missing," Miss Marple replied sharply, gauging the immediate shift in the air, the tightening of muscles and the pallor on Lady Agnes's face, as if a ghost had gathered beside her. "Might it be that such presumption burdens you? I hardly see how this matters in light of the tragedy we've endured. It seems rather ill-timed to—" Lady Agnes paused, an imperceptible tremor betraying her delicate facade. "You're surely mistaken. Lord Worthington had left everything to me," she insisted, attempting to reclaim the upper hand, yet a shadow of doubt flashed across her eyes. "Did he now?" Miss Marple's voice took on a contemplative tone, her keen instincts sharpening as she scanned the study for further evidence. The lady who denounces all claims is often the one clutching the dagger. Sir Archibald Worthington, his visage pale against the backdrop of cluttered books, stepped forward, his brows deeply furrowed with recognition. "You are treading dangerous waters, Miss Marple. Accusations leveled against one's own family can lead to ruin. Quite a spectacle." His voice stripped with the kind of politeness one reserves for unwelcome guests. "Ah, yes, but one must also remember that what is revealed in the light is but a fraction of the whole," Miss Marple replied sharply, her eyes narrowing on Archibald. "And you, perhaps more than most, know the dangers of unanswered questions. Your deductions are becoming almost too clever for comfort," Lord Worthington snapped defensively, but she noted how he flinched, revealing layers beneath the carefully cultivated politeness. "If anyone should be concerned, it is the one left here to bear the burdens and complications of this estate." "Complications such as the lost will, Miss Marple replied, with a fleeting smile. "Tell me, Lord Worthington, did you know of any hidden documents within the pages of your father's books? Perhaps an old ledger, or letters that could lead us to the replacement?" "What are you implying?" he sneered, the flush rising in his cheeks deeper, and the shadows lengthening around them. "My father had set matters in place long ago. Then anything recent must be of concern." Miss Marple's eyes danced around the room, cataloguing every tremor, every twitch. "Sarah, do you recall if anything else seemed displaced or rearranged while you dusted this study? Even an errant paper, another clue that might reveal a hint of what lies hidden?" Sarah faltered, her eyes far away, searching the recesses of memory. "I did find a letter tucked behind a novel on a rather occult phenomenon at I." "Then let us not waste another moment," Miss Marple interjected urgently, the crack of thunder underscoring her resolve. With that, the three of them set to searching, rifling through bookshelves and drawers, frantically in pursuit of the truth. Tension mounted as the minutes trickled by like grains of sand. Suddenly, a skittering sound echoed from beneath the desk. A small metal box darted into the light, half hidden in the shadows. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. "A riddled heart of secrets," she whispered, reaching down with careful fingers. As she grasped the box handle, an unfamiliar voice called out, a dreadful yet beloved sound, echoing from the corridor just beyond. Miss Marple. It was Henry, the butler, his voice laden with panic. I must warn you, you are not safe here. With that, the air turned cold, as an icy dread seeped deeper into Miss Marple's bones, and she felt the walls of Lavender Hall close in around her. With the box held firmly in her grasp, she turned the latch, yet the screech echoed like a cry of warning against the storm outside. Just then, the growing sound of hurried footsteps thudded towards them, the shadows from the corridor collapsing into a portentous gloom, filling the study with an overwhelming presence that sent shivers rushing down her spine. A chilling realization took hold. The past had come surging forward, and its secrets, long buried, now clamored to break free in the most devastating of ways. And as the door creaked open, uncertainty loomed like a dark cloud overhead, an insidious fear whispering through the cracks and crevices of Lavender Hall, threatening to unravel all that they had tried to keep hidden. Chapter 5 vanished without a trace. A piercing scream shattered the midnight stillness, reverberating through the stone corridors of Lavender Hall. A sound laced with sheer terror that sent bolts of ice coursing through Miss Marple's veins. Bolting from the shadows of the study and through the oak-paneled archway, she arrived in the grand foyer, where a flickering candle barely illuminated the pallor on Sarah's face. Miss Marple, Henry is gone. He vanished from the kitchen as if he was swallowed whole. The manic tremor in the maid's voice added to the sense of impending dread that clung to the air, thick as the brackish fog rolling in from the nearby moors. As she peered into the shadowy recesses of the manor, Miss Marple felt the suffocating weight of secrets pressing down upon her. In the distant rumblings of thunder, she sensed a storm, both in nature and in the treacherous emotions swirling around them. It struck her then, clear as lightning, that Henry had been the weakest link to the truth. For in this world of quaking loyalties and hidden agendas, the butler had navigated the tides of unmeasured reticence, dishing out tales and truths like a skilled fisherman, casting out lines only to draw them in again, anchored by the depths of his own knowledge. "This is no trivial matter, Sarah," she said calmly, though inside her heart raced like a caged bird, desperate for freedom. He knew too much to disappear without warning. We must find him, and sharply. Together, they plunged into the oppressive dark of the hallway, the flickering light barely keeping the shadows at bay. The house groaned under the storm's wrath, each crash of thunder resonating like the boom of unrepentant consequences, looming just outside their grasp. "He last mentioned something about missing items," Sarah ventured, her eyes wide, barely containing her fraught feelings. "He had voiced concerns over the shawl and the will, Miss Marple. I thought—" "Never mind what you thought," Miss Marple snapped, her voice sharp as glass. "We must focus. If someone wanted to silence Henry, they would do so now, or it might already be too late." The thought sent a chill through her, and they quickened their pace, heartbeats drumming erratically as they approached the kitchen quarters. But the kitchen was as eerie as the rest of the estate. A sprinkling of moonlight cut through the glass window, revealing overturned chairs and scattered pantry items as though a struggle had occurred. And yet, where was Henry? A rustle of fabric drew Miss Marple's attention to a tableau that struck her as odd. Upon the table, the remnants of a hastily prepared tea service lay abandoned. "Sarah, do you see the way the teacups are arranged?" she offered, her mind whirling. "There are 3 cups, yet only 2 saucers. Why would our brave butler risk serving tea in the presence of grief-stricken guests?" Perhaps Mr. Kneebright came for a cup, Sarah offered hesitantly, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Indeed, or perhaps they were discussing matters beyond mere tea and crumpets, Miss Marple mused, inching closer to the table. This cupboard over here, Sarah. Look. She crouched down, inspecting a corner where dust had gathered undisturbed, save for a thin, glistening line carved in its surface. Someone has been sifting through here recently. In the back of her mind, the clever machinations of human behavior began to unfurl. Every hurried gesture, each flicker of concern painted in shades of hostility. Where are the others, she muttered, more to herself, as she glanced toward the open door leading to the dining room. The rest of the family had pulled back into the confines of their own fears, cocooned in their rooms like prisoner-willed butterflies. Just as she pondered this, the sudden crash of a cup breaking next door sent her heart racing again. "Sarah, stay here," she commanded, dread pooling in her gut as she made her way down the darkened corridor towards the sound. "Let me come with you," Sarah insisted. But Miss Marple's voice held firm. "You may be safer here. Now keep your wits about you." With tentative steps, Miss Marple reached the dining room, only to find Lord Worthington, his hands trembling above a shattered teacup amidst a sea of scattered papers. "If only we could find the truth, it would save us all," he declared, his speech hitching as the usual composed lord frayed at the edges. "But what are we to lose to dullard debates? Not what we have to lose, but what we have lost entirely," she replied, her voice a calm iceberg amidst his emotional turmoil. And she instantly sensed how closely the matter cut to his core. Henry was delving into matters less than suitable for the ears of his master, wasn't he? Lord Worthington's face paled, only to harden defensively. "We should not speak of such things, Miss Marple. It is unbecoming." "Unbecoming, perhaps," she agreed, "but necessary. Are you certain that the internal struggles of this estate earned the lessons of silence? Was Henry himself onto something?" His eyes flickered in panic, a current of truth surfacing in the midst of denial. "You leap to conclusions," he whispered, his gaze falling to the scattered papers before him, each hold a vulnerability he wished to hide. Miss Marple's instincts ignited. There, amidst the detritus of mundanity, there lay a note, partially obscured. She reached down, her fingers brushing against the cool, crumpled paper. As she hesitated only briefly, a slight sound behind her made her turn, her heart pounding. Sarah had crept closer, and a shadow beyond flitted past the glass pane of the window. "Sarah," Miss Marple began, but the warning froze on her tongue. Something isn't right," Sarah whispered, her gaze riveted out the window toward the imposing dark beyond. That's when it struck her. The weight of the disarray, the sudden absence of Henry, the striking parallels in their fractured emotions. "He has been looking into the estate's ledgers, hasn't he?" she said slowly, piecing together the frantic threads of her observations. "Oftentimes, the truth is more convoluted than we wish it to be. And perhaps, just perhaps, the new will was hidden in those very papers he sought to unravel." Suddenly, there was a loud crash from the entrance hall, followed by hurried footsteps, the unmistakable sound of a figure darting through the doorway, quickly followed by a figure in white reappearing on the fringes of their vision. And just like that, in the pulse of a heartbeat and the shuddering rhythm of her own breath, the room split apart with visceral realization. Something or someone had propelled the shadows of Lavender Hall into a chaotic waltz of despair, where the fragments began to tessellate into deadly patterns. With urgency licking at her heels, Miss Marple turned, only to find the hallway now empty. A silence more pronounced and sinister than before. Henry had vanished, without a trace. But as she stood, listening to the storm outside and the weight of suspicion thickening the air, she knew, with utmost certainty, the answers lay within those very walls, buried beneath layers of pretense, and she had only begun to unearth their secrets. The game of deception was far from over. Chapter 6. The Not-So-Silent Witness. A shattering crash broke the murmur of the storm outside, reverberating through the stone walls of Lavender Hall like the shriek of a banshee. Miss Marple spun towards the source of the sound, a shadow darting past the window, cloaked in darkness, followed immediately by the frenzied flap of a door swinging wide across the entryway. A figure stood just beyond the threshold, breathless and wide-eyed, and it took only a heartbeat for Miss Marple to recognize the unmistakable silhouette of Millicent Green, a village seamstress. The candlelight spilled into the hallway, illuminating the terror etched upon Millicent's features, a stark contrast to the usually placid countenance of the woman who bothered herself primarily with bolts of fabric and intricate stitches. "Miss Marple," Millicent gasped, clutching a pair of tattered gloves like a lifeline, her voice heavy with urgency. "You must listen. I've seen something terrible." An icy draft swept through the corridor, extinguishing the flames of the candles flickering on the table. Miss Marple felt a shudder ripple across her skin as the heavy air thickened with foreboding. "What did you see, my dear?" She stepped closer, her senses sharpening, the dulcet tones of the storm outside fading into the distance. A shadowy figure near the hall, lurking and watching. Millicent's eyes darted toward the tumultuous night, as though expecting the figure to appear anew. "I didn't recognize them, but it felt wrong, unnatural. They were out there, just beyond the veil of the trees, where the moonlight barely touched the ground." "Tell me exactly what you saw," Miss Marple urged, her voice a calm anchor amid the rising tide of tension. Every detail, no matter how small. They stood in the unsettling quiet, a pounding of rain outside mirroring the thundering of Miss Marple's heart. Millicent wrestled with her thoughts, her brow creased. "I was returning home from the market." She paused, eyes clouding with distress as she recalled the events of the evening. "I could have sworn I saw them watching, directly from the edge of the woods, their eyes glinting like lanterns. It sent chills down my spine." "Were they alone?" Miss Marple pressed, her mind already cataloguing the possibilities. "What were they wearing? You must have seen something to help us identify them." Millicent hesitated, twisting her gloves in her hands. I did notice a dark cloak. Yes, it flowed behind them, hiding their face. Oh, Miss Marple, it lingered there long after I had hurried away, as if waiting for something, waiting for someone. The information hung heavy in the air, and an electrifying revelation struck Miss Marple. A cloak, a figure, waiting furtively. Pieces clicked together like a mischievous puzzle, teasing the boundaries of her understanding. "And did you see any familiar objects with them? A hat, shoes, or perhaps anything that belonged to our dear Henry?" Millicent shook her head slowly. "No, nothing of the sort. But I do recall a strange impression. Something glimmered at their side. A glint of metal. I can't be certain." "Thank you, Millicent. You've done well," Miss Marple replied briskly, but her thoughts swirled, a shadowy figure flitting about, concealing its face and purpose. Deception thrived in thickets like these, and secrets had a way of wrapping themselves in the dusk, hidden with ease. Stay close and be on your guard. Just then, a sudden crash echoed once more, this time from the dining room, the sound splintering through Miss Marple's concentration. "Wait," she cautioned, as Millicent instinctively flinched, but Miss Marple moved purposefully down the corridor, determined that the doorways of Lavender Hall would yield their secrets. They entered the dining room to find equal parts chaos and quietude. Shattered crockery amidst the swirling papers, and Lord Worthington still hovering, hands clenched around the edge of the table, as if bracing against a storm unleashed within. "It's gone," he shouted, a tremor in his voice betraying his previous composure. "The ledger. It's no longer here." "Which ledger?" Miss Marple asked steadily, cutting him off sharply, her instinct warring with politeness. "The one regarding the estate?" "Yes, precisely. The very one Henry was—" He swallowed hard, casting a panicked glance at Millicent, who lingered behind Miss Marple. His vulnerability cut as keenly as the siren's wail from the tempest outside. The very one he sought to uncover. It contained financial records and correspondence of dire importance. "Financial records, you say?" she probed, her eyes narrowing in keen assessment. What sort of details lurking within its pages could provoke such severe consequences? "Perhaps those that unravel the very fabric of trust within these walls," Lord Worthington replied, his voice trembling with an unmistakable despair. "Henry was concerned that money had gone missing, larger sums than what would be deemed acceptable. He wanted to confront me." Miss Marple's eyes glinted with sharp deduction at the shift in the atmosphere. "So you see it as a betrayal," she observed, posture unwavering. He sensed discrepancies. And what if those discrepancies led to a hidden agenda here, one that lies with Lady Agatha or Mr. Kneebright? But just as the breath of uncertainty passed between them, a strange rustling at the window drew their collective gaze. The rain-soaked pane was fogged by droplets clinging desperately to its surface, but beyond, movement flickered, a shifting shadow, mere inches or feet away. "What was that?" Millicent stammered, her fear infectious. Miss Marple's chin jutted forward, her instincts sharp and unwavering. "We are not alone here, I fear. Lord Worthington, keep your eyes toward the window. Millicent, gather yourself. Stand firm." The tension quivered as they all engaged in unspoken resolve, awareness prickling at the back of their necks. Each crevice of Lavender Hall transformed into a cacophony of whispers, secrets entangling the very air that threaded through them. Just as Miss Marple readied herself to investigate, a vicious clawing noise erupted from the entrance hall, followed by a swift flourish of footsteps retreating. Her heart raced. A swirl of panic shot through her veins as she edged toward the source. "What are they hiding?" Miss Marple breathed, her pulse pounding in her ears as she took a tentative step forward, only to stop short, the landscape of the room shifting with the weight of evoked apprehension. Then, like the darkened clouds releasing their fury, a revelation struck her with chilling finality. A forgotten key, a ledger, a spectre long concealed. In the court of unrepentant truths, her instincts screamed the pulse of urgency. "Stay here," she commanded fiercely, heart pounding against her ribs as she darted into the hallway, resolve bursting forth like the storm outside, ready to unravel the very fabric of their facade. But as she turned to race after the shadow, the spectre above her head whispered a haunting realization. It was the keeper of secrets, and what they had unmasked might have dire consequences of its own. With the air thick and malice enveloping, Miss Marple found herself in the clutches of treachery, a suspense as chilling as the storm howling against the walls of Lavender Hall. Chapter 7. Secrets in the Library. A piercing scream shattered the suffocating silence of Lavender Hall, spiraling into the night and causing Miss Marple to freeze in her tracks. Without a second thought, she dashed toward the library, her heart pounding in unison with the thunder rumbling ominously above, a grim reminder of the tempest raging outside. The sound echoed through the spacious hallway, each footfall heavy with dread as she flung open the ornate wooden door, the hinges protesting like a wounded animal. Inside, the room lay awash in shadow and flickering candlelight, but a glimmer of something bright caught her eye. A necklace, perhaps, or something more foreboding, laid starkly atop the polished mahogany desk. Millicent Green stood frozen by the door, eyes wide and her hands trembling, as she pointed toward the massive, gnarled oak bookcase. It came from there. "I swear it," she stammered, her breath coming in quick, frightened gasps. A book fell, and then, "Oh, Miss Marple," I felt something watching. The thick, leather-bound tomes loomed around them, accumulated dust drifting softly in the dim light, adding another layer to the unsettling atmosphere. Miss Marple took a cautious step forward, eyes narrowing as she approached the bookcase. "A book has fallen," she murmured, the words almost lost in the rising storm outside. Instantly, she felt an urge to scrutinize the shelves, the weight of unseen eyes heavy upon her shoulders. Shadows stretched across the room, dancing with the flicker of candlelight, as if alive and subtly mocking. With a swift motion, she pulled at the nearest book, a hefty volume on local history. As she opened it, a faint rustle echoed from behind the shelves. "Millicent, stay close," she instructed, unease pricking at her senses. The moment the words left her lips, a sharp metallic sound rang out like the click of a mechanism, and an entire section of the shelf shifted. Ducking backward, Miss Marple's eyes widened as a hidden compartment cracked open, dust motes rising from its depths like wraiths escaping confinement. She could hardly believe it. The sudden revealing of the compartment twisted the very foundation of their search. "Look," Millicent exclaimed, her voice a mixture of dread and curiosity. "What's inside?" With bated breath, Miss Marple reached into the darkened hollow, her fingers brushing against something cold and surprisingly heavy. Her heart quickened as she withdrew it. An envelope, worn at the edges and sealed with an ornate insignia. It bore the initials WW in a flourish that hinted both at elegance and authority. "Is this—" Millicent ventured, uncertainty hanging between them. "Only one way to find out," Miss Marple replied, her voice steady despite the pulse of intrigue thrumming through her veins. She carefully detached the seal and pulled out the letter, unfolding it with precise fingers. The script was elegant, yet familiar, swoops and loops that evoked a sense of nostalgia, that the words themselves twisted in upon her with a dark consequence. "My dear Lord Worthington," she began to read, and as she deciphered each line, the atmosphere around them clung thickly, tilting toward dread. The letter revealed grievances that simmered beneath the surface of genteel society, the emissaries of wealth and lineage bound in forces of greed, unresolved. It spoke of hidden funds, of a transaction made on a darkened night, of threats veiled in deceit. "Oh my," she exhaled, her eyes darting over the letter's contents. "What an explosive confession this is." "Confession?" Millicent echoed, tension thickening her throat. "What do you mean?" "It implicates—" Miss Marple hesitated, her mind racing. "It suggests that Lord Worthington is involved in financial indiscretions deeper than we might have anticipated. But more than that, she continued, turning the letter within her palm, like a talisman. It hints at his discontent with others in the household. Complex web of mistrust and betrayal that could very well lead to murder. The weight of revelation hung heavily in the air between them, shimmering with anxiety. Millicent took a precarious step backwards, fear casting her features in stark relief. "Do you think... could Lord Worthington have something to do with Henry's disappearance?" "That's exactly what we must consider," Miss Marple replied, her thoughts churning like the brewing storm outside. The pieces of the puzzle started to interlock, forming a grim picture of motives threaded with desperation. Among the shadows of Lavender Hall lay rivalry and rage masked by civility. Yet we cannot act on mere speculation. We need more evidence, something to ground this revelation in irrefutable truth. Suddenly, a noise reverberated through the corridor. A crash, followed by hurried whispers. Miss Marple set the letter down upon the desk, dread gripping her heart. "Someone's coming," she said quietly, yet firmly, alerting Millicent to the sudden peril thickening in the air. "We must conceal what we've found. Let them think we are delving into the tomes of classical literature." Moving quickly, Miss Marple returned the letter to the hidden compartment, urging Millicent to help her rearrange the books to disguise their discovery. The atmosphere shifted with a tangible weight. The shadows lurking around them felt almost predatory. Just as they managed to secure the sabotage shelf, the door swung wide, revealing Lord Worthington himself, breathless and wide-eyed. "Miss Marple," he exclaimed, taking in the scene, with an expression that melded irritation with alarm. "What are you doing here at this hour? Have you discovered something?" "Only some quaint histories of the estate," she replied, utilizing every ounce of her composure, carefully highlighting the deception in the thread of her words. "Quite fascinating, really." Yet as he stepped closer, the flickering candles illuminated behind him, casting both long shadows and deeper questions. A glimmer of apprehension flickered across his features, the briefest acknowledgement of fear that didn't suit a lord. In that moment, Miss Marple sensed his aura shifted, layered with a depth that hinted at hidden malice. "Is there something you wish to reveal, my lord?" she asked, her voice gentle but commanding, as sharp as the biting wind swirling outside. She could hear the shadows tremble, whispering secrets that turned her blood cold. But before he could respond, an echo of footsteps faded into the hall, distant but deliberate, pulling her attention toward the door with an electric jolt of urgency. "That direction? Who goes there?" she pressed, her heart racing, as dread wrapped tighter around her, like the storm outside. Before Lord Worthington could react, the shadow of a figure slipped through the doorway and vanished, a flicker of white fabric, the only evidence of their presence. "Miss Marple, I assure you," he insisted, his voice dripping with uncharacteristic desperation, "there's nothing to worry about, it's just the wind." But Miss Marple's instincts screamed otherwise. The storm outside paled in comparison to the churning tempest brewing within the hearts of those cloistered inside Lavender Hall. With one deliberate quivering breath, the weight of an unspoken truth poised dangerously on her lips, she faced him with renewed resolve. "What if," she said, eyes flashing with revelation, "the secrets we unearth here could shatter everything?" And as the echoes of escape faded into foreboding silence, one thing was indubitably clear. In a place so rich with untruths, every glimmer of reality would tear apart the very fabric of falsehoods, leaving them to confront a devastating truth that changed everything, including their very lives. And just like that, like a candle flickering in the dark, a new fear pressed against her chest. Someone in Lavender Hall might never see dawn again. Chapter 8. Shadows Lengthen. The distant tolling of the church bell echoed through Lavender Hall, shattering the veil of silence that hung with palpable unease. A flash of lightning illuminated the grand foyer for a fleeting moment, casting intricate shadows that twisted along the walls like restless spirits. Then came the unmistakable sound. A frantic knock, harsh and unrelenting, reverberating through the cavernous space, as if calling forth all the secrets the night had devoured. Miss Marple's heart seized. The urgency edged into the very marrow of her bones. "Millicent," she called, her voice crisp through the silence that ensued. The young woman stumbled out from behind the imposing oak bookcase, eyes wide and filled with panic. The once dominating thunder outside had transformed into an eerie quiet, amplifying the suffocating tension that threatened to suffocate them. What was that? Millicent's voice wavered, scanning the hallway as if expecting shadows to sprout legs and dance toward them. "I fear it may presage something alarming," Miss Marple replied, moving cautiously toward the large double doors. The cadence of the knocking, insistent now, shot a jolt of adrenaline through her. "Stay alert. We cannot afford to underestimate the implications of the night's revelations." Steeling herself, Miss Marple swung the door wide, the heavy wood creaking ominously. The storm had abated, leaving a damp chill that did little to assuage the intrusion of darkness, lingering at the edges of their world. Before her stood Lord Worthington, his visage pale, clothes disheveled, as if he had been wrestling with a spectre of his own. "Miss Marple, you must come." His voice, thick with urgency, trembled slightly, betraying an undercurrent of fear, despite his claims of composure. "It's Henry." "Henry?" Millicent echoed, the name hanging in the air like an unwelcomed guest. "What do you mean?" "His study, it's—" Lord Worthington faltered, collecting his breath. "It's open, the window's shattered, he's vanished." A nervous flutter swept through Miss Marple, her mind racing with the implications. Would that not imply a hasty departure? She posited, noting the Lord's shifting stance, betraying deeper layers of trepidation. "He would not. No, this doesn't make sense. He wouldn't leave like this. And there's something more," he stammered, glancing furtively over his shoulder, as if the very walls had ears. There's a note. It's addressed to you." The fabric of tension that enveloped them thickened, curling around her. "A note?" Miss Marple's voice was steady, yet a flicker of curiosity ignited in her chest. "What does it say?" "Come quickly, I fear the worst," he insisted, and his eyes darted to the corridor as though something lurked just beyond sight. Without a word, Miss Marple and Millicent exchanged glances, a silent agreement passing between them. They followed Worthington down the hallway, the atmosphere fraught with unspoken dread as they ascended the worn, spiral staircase leading to Henry's study. Each creak of the wood underfoot resonated like the tolling of a funeral bell, a reminder of the gravity of their circumstances. When they reached the door, Miss Marple felt a chill seep into her bones. The door stood ajar, the remnants of the shattered window flickering faintly against the light of the flickering candles inside. "Stand back," she commanded softly, gesturing for Worthington and Millicent to allow her. Entry first, clearing the threshold of uncertainty buried behind the door. As she stepped into the room, her careful observation revealed small yet sinister details. The carpet was littered with broken glass, and the air carried a sharp scent of something unrecognizable, harsh and metallic. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted the note resting on the desk, its stark whiteness contrasted against the darkness surrounding it. "Shall we see what our dear Henry has to say?" Miss Marple murmured, her fingers gliding across the surface of the desk, brushing aside a fallen inkwell and pushing aside the remnants of an overturned chair. Millicent stepped forward, her breath catching, as she spotted the ornate crest. With deliberation, Miss Marple unfolded the note, her brow furrowing as she deciphered the elegantly slanted script. "Dearest Miss Marple, I fear the shadows are lengthening, and I can no longer remain beneath their weight. I have gone to seek the truth. Should you find this, know that the choices I've made may unveil more than the facade we all share. Look within the mirror, and it will show more than you know." The note slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the desk as a staff of shock raced through the room. "What does he mean?" Millicent's voice cracked, threads of panic lacing her words. "The mirror?" Before Miss Marple could respond, a glint of something caught her eye. An envelope tucked precariously beneath the desk chair. She bent down, retrieving it hastily. The stamp bore the same ornate insignia as that of the letter they had unsealed the previous night. "This cannot be mere coincidence," she murmured, quirking an eyebrow as she glanced at Worthington. "More secrets," he implored, a hint of frustration creeping into his voice. "We need a clearer sense of what Henry was entangled in." "Indeed," Miss Marple replied, her mind whirring with her observations. "But a second letter so quick off the heels of the first leads me to suspect an urgency beyond mere coincidence." She eyed Lord Worthington sharply, the quick catch in his breath hinting at emotions too raw to conceal. "What are you not telling us?" Even as he opened his mouth, a sudden crash rang out, drawing their attention once more toward the shattered window, and instinctively they turned, only to be nearly bowled over by the arrival of a figure silhouetted against the morning light. One glance at the shadowy outlines sent a chill racing through Miss Marple's heart. This presence was no mere coincidence. "Delete all that I've said," the intruder murmured breathlessly, stepping closer and flicking a glance at Miss Marple's startled expression. In that instant, a revelation struck her with humiliating clarity. The words from Henry's letter pulsed like a beckoning siren, threading through the burgeoning malice encasing them all. "Who are you?" Millicent gasped, clenching her fists. But before the figure could respond, a second knock echoed from the hallway, fierce and demanding, transforming the tension into something more fiery, more sinister. Miss Marple's pulse quickened as she realized the secrets that unfolded here might very well ignite a greater fire, one that would claim not just the innocent, but all the shadows lengthening across Lavender Hall. Chapter 9. The Final Trap. A blood-curdling scream shattered the stillness of Lavender Hall, reverberating through the empty corridors like a desperate plea for help. Miss Marple whipped around, her heart pounding, as the sound pierced the gloom, quickly followed by the clatter of something heavy, a chair perhaps overturning in the study. Shadows leapt against the walls, seeming to dance with a sinister life of their own. "Millicent," she gasped, the name tumbling from her lips like a charm, aimed at dispelling dark magic. The silence was heavy, nearly suffocating, as she braced herself, instinctively reaching for the faint glimmer of clarity amid the chaos. The two women rushed toward the study, dread coiling in Miss Marple's stomach. As they neared, she could feel an electric pulse in the air, thick with tension and unsaid secrets. They burst through the door to discover Lord Worthington standing against the far wall, his hands pressed against his head as if to muffle the horror around him. "Henry," he stammered, barely able to form the words. In that instant, Miss Marple's keen eyes darted around the room. The remnants of last night's disturbance lingered. A shattered window, remnants of glass, glittering against the dark wooden floor like fallen stars. But something else caught her eye. A photo frame had slipped from its perch, now angled awkwardly against the wall. She moved closer, noticing the glass was still intact, no crack, no sign of injury. It seems the chaos outside does not disturb the dapper photo of Mr. Henry, she murmured, her voice steady amid the turbulent emotions swirling around her. Miss Marple, Millicent breathed, taking a hesitant step forward. What if he's truly gone? What if it isn't merely a ruse? The fear in her voice caused a shiver to ripple through the air, echoing the dread that clung heavily to them. Henry, he was a clever man, Worthington chimed in, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. He would not simply vanish without reason. A premeditated departure, undoubtedly. What do you mean? Millicent's eyes widened as she took in the chaos of the room, shadows pooling ominously. How can you speculate such things at a time like this? Miss Marple, still scanning the room, noted Worthington's agitation and the slight tremor in his hands as they fidgeted at the edges of his coat. Because what I fear most is that someone is orchestrating this, he confessed, his eyes flitting nervously. There are those who seek to destabilize us, a web spun of deceit tightening around each of us. A note, Millicent interjected, her features taut with unease. We must understand what he said, the truths he left behind. Miss Marple, feeling a peculiar surge of confidence, stepped forward and retrieved the note once more, ensuring it was safe between her fingers. He mentioned shadows and hinted at a mirror, she mused, recalling the words that had haunted her since she first read them. It seems a reflection of more than mere physicality. What if he feared he was being watched, even now? Watched, Worthington scoffed, his voice strained. We are all dealing with our own secrets, Miss Marple. But it was Millicent who seemed to recognize the tension, straightening her stance, eyes narrowing. You speak of secrets. Yours seems to weigh the heaviest, Lord Worthington. You must spill forth your knowledge about the fate of Henry. Do not be absurd, Worthington snapped, eyes darkening. You are hardly in a position to demand such matters. Perhaps, Miss Marple interjected, raising her hand slightly in an attempt to quell the rising wave of hostility. But only by convening the others can we draw the net tighter to trap our phantom. It is time to set our own one trap, to uncover what lurks beneath the surface. And how do you propose we do that? He challenged, glancing toward the door, as though ready to flee from both the room and the very confrontation Miss Marple suggested. Miss Marple glanced around, her mind whirling with the details that only she seemed to capture. Invite all of those who were present for the sordid affairs of last evening to assemble here. Tonight, she nodded thoughtfully, a plan forming nearly complete in her mind. We shall confront our spectres directly, unmasking truths as we draw them together. Her calm logic fell sharply against Worthington's glory, but his apprehension was visible as they deliberated. And what guarantee do we have that they are truthful? Anyone at this hall could be complicit, every last one of us. It's true, Millicent added, glancing around the room. Within these walls, we all wear our masks, but we shall need our wits sharp, for the trap is now set. We might find we are not the only players on this dark stage. Miss Marple moved with newfound purpose, already envisioning the evening ahead. A fine dinner, countless naive questions, and eyes alight with hidden terror. It was a frail line, delicate as spun glass, upon which they now walked. Hours later, as the clock danced patiently toward evening, the atmosphere thickened, shadows stretching as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, dragging a shroud of twilight across Lavender Hall. A small gathering of guests emerged in the drawing room, each with a glimmer of suspicion clinging to them, fingers tracing their own thoughts in beer and sherry. Conversations spiraled in endless directions, each polite smile masking hidden agendas. Miss Marple, keenly observant amidst the gathering buzz, noted a tension weaving between guests. Lady Parker leaned discreetly toward Lord Worthington, her voice a mere whisper as glances darted between those gathered. The air itself felt charged, with secrets pulsating just beyond the surface. Lady Parker, I clearly see you've brought along an unsettling elegance, Miss Marple called out, her tone laced with feigned lightness, but wrapped in scrutiny. Might we know what thoughts cross your mind? Or, perhaps more accurately, what suspicions shadow your heart about our dear Henry? Lady Parker straightened, her countenance turning to ice, a mask held too tightly in place. Silence enveloped the room, the eye of a storm that was just beginning to unfurl its ferocity. The sudden wariness in Worthington's gaze mirrored her own anxiety as all eyes turned toward the heart of the matter, poised delicately on Miss Marple's reckoning. But before Lady Parker could answer, the door to the drawing room burst open, and a frantic servant stumbled in, his face pale, breathless. "My lady, there's been an accident." A scream heard from atop the stairs. "Someone has fallen." Time seemed to freeze, locking Miss Marple in a vice of horror. A cold realization swept through her. The web they dared to spin had tangled them all too tightly, each participating, pausing on the cusp of revelation. "What?" Worthington exclaimed, voice choking on disbelief. "Who?" The servant faltered for a moment, eyes darting wildly and landing at Miss Marple's poised demeanor. It is Lady Parker. She was upstairs." Before he could finish, the room erupted into chaos, voices overlapping in wild accusations and frantic confusion. But all of Miss Marple's focus narrowed to attending that final damning truth. The trap was set, but now it appeared it would ensnare more than just the guilty. As she took a calculated step toward the door, her heart thudded painfully in her chest. Time was running short, danger loomed closer, an invisible predator in their midst. The hotel was now shrouded in a deeper darkness, one that seemed poised to consume them all. With the fiery revelation still flickering in her mind, a disembodied whisper weaving through the night. The last threads tightened around her. Someone would not escape this night unscathed. Chapter 10. Confession in the Parlor. A single chilling scream erupted from the upstairs hallway, slicing through the evening chatter like a knife through silk. The air in the drawing room held an electric charge, every heart momentarily suspended in shock, as if the very walls of Lavender Hall quivered in anticipation of calamity. Miss Marple felt the shiver race down her spine, matching the pulse of despair that rippled among the crowded guests. With swift urgency, she pushed past the gathering, a mass of panic and bewilderment, as ministers of chaos buzzed around her like disturbed hornets. Rushing through the ornate wooden door and up the grand staircase, the morning's chaos flickered back to her. Shadows lengthened in flickering gaslight, lurking in corners, as if whispering secrets of dread to each passing footstep. Desperate to reach the liminal space where truth intertwined with deceit, Miss Marple raced toward the sound of shuffling footsteps mixed with murmurs. Some essential truth, veiled behind trembling lips. As she reached the final turn of the staircase, her breath caught in her throat. The scene before her was pandemonium incarnate. Lady Parker lay crumpled at the foot of the stairs, a wisp of a woman who had painted elegance with echoes of fragility. Frantic servants hovered around her, and panic filled the room, while Lord Worthington cradled her head, desperation dripping from every word he uttered. "Lady Parker, please, stay with us. Miss Marple." Millicent's voice was a tremor, grasping at the edge of control as she pushed through the throng. What now? Kneeling beside the fallen woman, Miss Marple's sharp gaze flickered over Lady Parker's pale features, her breath shallow but steady, a hint of consciousness still fighting against the tide of oblivion. "Get some water and room for air," she barked, her mind racing with concern and observation. The woman could not remain unconscious amidst this swirling chaos. She needed someone to confess her burdens while tethering together the frayed ends of destinies undone. "Perhaps it is best to awaken her gently," Millicent whispered, her fingers trembling. But she was upstairs alone, and it is in the whispers of silence that truth often lies, Miss Marple replied, more to herself than to anyone else. "We must speak to her immediately. The ties are clearer than they seem." Bracing herself, she leaned closer, concentrating as the flickering shadows danced around them, silhouetting their urgent huddled form against the dramatic backdrop of the staircase. Just then, Lady Parker opened her eyes. "Henry," she murmured, the name escaping her lips as a soft cry, swirling through the air with an air of delicate accusation. All the surrounding faces drew in closer. Silence clutched at their throats, thick with anticipation. "Tell us, dear lady," Miss Marple coaxed gently, her voice soothing yet firm. "What happened? What do you mean, Henry?" The lady's delicate fingers twitched as she gazed, unfocused, into the flickering candlelight. He was going to expose something," she choked. "He had a secret. It would ruin us all." Panic-filled murmurs danced through the air as the gathered crowd took a step back, but Miss Marple pressed forward, ignoring the crushing whispers. "Who were you afraid of, Lady Parker?" A tremor ran through her frame as clarity washed over her, eyes widening in realization. "I did not want him to." Before her breath became an erratic gasp, uncertainty writhed under the weight of her choices. "I cannot say." "Why not? Could it be because those truths lie in your own heart?" Miss Marple pressed, unleashing the storm of revelations lingering in the air. Fields of shadows seemed to encircle their intimate gathering, and tension crackled in the drawn faces around her. "He spoke of shadows and mirrors, Miss Marple," Lady Parker finally exclaimed, panic racing through her voice. "Those who were not what they appeared, everything. Everything connected indeed, if you could but share what you fear. We stand here at a precipice," Miss Marple urged, rising to her full height. "Do not stay silent now when the hour is darkening." "Then it could be worth the risk," Lady Parker's voice wavered, a sudden resolve issuing forth. He knew something about Worthington and Millicent, crimes committed, lives ruined, all wrapped in the guise of decency. A mirror reflecting only hid. That's when the flickering candles suddenly dimmed, plunging the room into an unsettling twilight as a shadow flickered past, draped in an enigmatic halo of darkness. All eyes darted toward the corner, breath held as if the room itself were holding secrets. "Foul play. You think we are innocent?" Lord Worthington's voice thundered, the mask of fear remoulding into anger, his expression darkening like a storm-soaked night. Do you really believe she holds the truth? Truth or lies? Merely another concealment. From what we are, Miss Marple shot back, her voice sharp as broken glass. Enough, Lady Parker shouted, her fragile voice regaining strength with a sudden intensity, cutting through their stifled breaths. Enough. I will speak for all. Henry, he had the system in his grasp. The hidden danger was here. Someone would not stop at treachery if it led to ruin. Before she could finish, the parlor doors swung open violently, drawing another figure into the light. A hooded presence, glimmering with intent, eyes fixed upon Lady Parker, and a dagger glinting ominously under the candlelit glow. Out with it, Parker. Speak, or you shan't have the chance. A voice hissed, low and dark, sending tremors coursing through Miss Marple, just as panic erupted anew among the guests. "Who are you?" Millicent cried, stepping back in horror, grasping for Miss Marple's arm. But the light flickered, and with a final shuddering breath, Lady Parker collapsed, her head lolling back, while the figure melted once more into the shadows, leaving nothing but an echo of dread behind. Miss Marple stood frozen. A grim realization tightened in her chest, loss courting her once more. The trap had sprung, but danger lingered, whispering lecherous lies, even amidst the flush of terror. How many shadows had worn the masks of innocence that night? Time was running short, and the impending curtain fall would expose more than mere secrets. By God, Worthington breathed, eyes wide with panic. Where is she? But Miss Marple's mind spun, locking on a sudden revelation, cold as ice. Someone among them had taken the next step, staving off honesty with every breath. Suddenly, she understood. The true game was just beginning. Stakes, life and death. And once again, the night was not finished with its confessions yet. Chapter 11. The puzzle unraveled. The sudden gasp tore through Lavender Hall, an audible shiver that slipped in beneath the current of whispered fears. A chilling hollow echoed where Lady Parker had collapsed, a dagger wound demonstratively tangible in the air, leaves rustling outside, as if propelled by unseen hands. Miss Marple felt the smothering weight of their collective pulse, an anxious thrum of uncertainty and despair that hung densely in the dimly lit drawing room. As she fixed her penetrating gaze on the now deserted corner where Lady Parker had come so close to unearthing perilous truths, an unsettling premonition simmered just beneath the surface, a cryptic errand that demanded revealing. "Gather your senses, my friends," Miss Marple commanded, her voice emerging as calm amidst the escalating chaos. Accusations had already begun weaving through the guests' frenzied minds, twisting their expressions into masks of panic and defensiveness. The flickering candlelight threw menacing shadows along their furrowed brows as she arranged the scattered pieces of this unfolding mystery in her mind, each fragment a reflection of deeper deceit, a game played shrewdly among friends. "Lady Parker may yet live to speak again," she continued, watching, as the nervous tension fell momentarily silent, a hopeful flickering in the otherwise thick gloom. But until then, we cannot ignore the truth, hovering just beyond our grasp. Every one of you here has something to offer toward resolving this grim tableau. It's time we shed our facades and dared to peel back the layers obscuring our truths. Recalling the whispers of Lady Parker's warning, she felt like a spider weaving a delicate web, catching her prey with each silken strand of emotion. Despair, guilt, and anger coursed through hidden veins. "Let's start with you, Lord Worthington," she posited, fixing him with a steady gaze. Before the crowd broke into a frightful uproar, you looked quite disturbed by Lady Parker's words, the mention of a secret that could destroy everything. Care to elucidate? The Lord's expression morphed, alarm flashing across his face. "What nonsense! You cannot hold me accountable for the ravings of a woman in distress," he protested, his voice fluttering yet firm, threading a mixture of defiance and fear into his tone. "I merely sought to assist her. And yet your desire to assist comes with a heavy price of confidence," Miss Marple interjected, allowing her intuition to wrangle the truth from the disjointed fragments she was piecing together. An unhinged fear glimmered in Worthington's eyes, swelling her suspicions further. "Perhaps it is not her fate that sets your heart to tremor, but an opportunity of your own unraveling." Across from him, Millicent's pale cheeks reddened as her hands fidgeted nervously in her lap, a telltale sign of hiding deeper motives beneath a polished surface. "There's no merit in dragging others through the mud, Miss Marple," she offered, though her eyes darted knowingly toward Worthington, flickering from him to Lady Parker in mere fright. "It is not mud we stand in, dear Millicent, but the unresolved edges of a game you all appear, and perhaps even conspire, to play," she countered coolly, emboldened by the sudden thrill of misdirection. At that moment, Miss Marple's keen mind whirled through her recollections, picking up on each discreet link that had been forged amidst their earlier gatherings. You both feared dear Henry's intentions, a shared link in the whispers between you. A tightening breathed life into the tension, and the air buzzed with a palpable sense of mistrust, trickling down crisscrossed glances among the guests with flickering uncertainty. It was as if the gathering itself had morphed into a den of conspirators, each holding back secrets threaded in darkness. Suddenly, amidst this intricate web of accusations, a minor detail floated to her mind, one staggering enough to wedge itself as a silent, yet crucial clue in the ever-expanding narrative. She focused on Worthington's past encounters with Henry, his lost ledger at the club, the forbidden glances exchanged with Millicent beneath flickering logs. You fear exposure, true. Yet there's a shadowed alliance cloaked in civility, Miss Marple pressed, her voice tight with conviction. Are you both entangled in matters of deceit? A sharp intake of breath from Millicent, coupled with Worthington's narrowing eyes, betrayed their connection, revealing the subtle undercurrent running deep. If you say so, Worthington scoffed, masking uncertainty with bravado. Then perhaps it is she who lies bare secrets, not I. She was close to Henry, so close that he may well have whispered words not meant for her ears. But I never showed any interest, Millicent burst out, her frustration apparent, tension swelling into volatile spirals of claim and counterclaim. Except he was an unbearable nuisance. Miss Marple clutched at the fragile threads unraveling before her, fervently hunting for the singular vein that would bring down this pernicious house of cards. It remains true that both of you lead lives entrenched in admiration, she snapped. A bond centered around this tangled affair, where deception breeds one puppet upon another. And your hands are merely puppets resting together, Worthington and Millicent. As Miss Marple traced the threads of their web, a sudden commotion broke out from the gathering of horrified faces, the faintest flicker of movement suggesting a second demeanor, lurking beyond the veil of pretense. She turned instinctively, her heart leaping into her throat as the doors swung open and an ominous figure appeared, an unmistakable silhouette, garbed in the same cloak of darkness that had so recently slipped away. Soon, All will come to light, secrets will burn, and alliances will dissolve. The voice rippled through the silence, serpentine and silky, yet laced with the volatility of a loaded husk. The intensity of the words curled around the gravity of the gathering like a brand, rooting them in chains of frozen horror. With each word, Miss Marple felt the unraveling of their fragile charade. Gripped by fear and an authoritative urgency, she demanded, "Name yourself." Nothing but a laugh resonated as the figure stepped backward, fading into the darkness, leaving behind nothing more than chilling echoes and a shroud of dread. In that moment, it struck Miss Marple with heartbreaking clarity. They were not merely characters caught in a web of their own making, but mere pawns in a game that morphed dangerously toward conclusion. This was not an ending. It was merely the cusp of a prologue to a more sinister tale yet to unfold. The stakes were lifeblood. In the flickering candlelight, the truth remained cloaked and treacherous, barely a breath above whispers that would seize them all before dawn. Time shrank like the dimming embers, spinning fragile destinies, and more than one soul may not see the light of day again. "Fate lies near," Miss Marple murmured, instinctively shutting them down, as dread seeped within. An unspoken realization. The final pieces were set to move, and secrets were no longer theirs to hold. Chapter 12. The Truth Behind the Chair. The thunderclap shattered the tense stillness, a fierce reminder that the storm outside mirrored the turmoil within Lavender Hall. As lightning severed the sky, illuminating the drawing room like the flash of revelation, a ghastly scream pierced the air, twisting through the uncertain hearts of the gathered guests. Miss Marple, heart racing, turned toward the source of the distress, a figure emerging from the shadows. Breathless, eyes wide with terror, it was Millicent, hands clutching her throat, her voice rising in pitch. "The chair! The chair!" she gasped, as though each syllable were a stake, driven through the fragile thread of sanity, holding them all together. "What do you mean, Millicent?" Worthington barked, his voice snapping like brittle wood under pressure. The others, still caught in the wake of Lady Parker's collapse, exchanged bewildered glances, the layers of deception clinging tighter as they began to regain their composure. But Millicent's terror was infectious, rippling through the group like a chilling breeze. Miss Marple's keen mind saw the connection unfurling between the present horror and a haunting past. Every word a key, every instinct a guide. Just look," Millicent stammered, pointing to the ornate armchair in the corner where Lady Parker had fallen. Heart thumping, Miss Marple edged closer, the scent of damp wood and aged leather intermingling with the heavy air, thick with apprehension. The shadows, cast by the flickering candles, danced erratically around her, and with each step the chair drew her in, whispering secrets only the most observant could discern. As she approached, her keen eye caught a glint of something amiss. A deeply imprinted indentation in the upholstery, almost masked by the iridescence of the fading light. "It's the dagger," she declared, casting a glance to the others, their faces a mix of anxiety and disbelief. While it may have vanished in the chaos, its echo lingers here. Daring to pull aside the fringed cover, her fingers brushed against the fabric. "There's been a struggle, a presence I can feel vividly. And yet," she continued, her voice steady, "there's more to uncover here. This chair has not only witnessed Lady Parker's fall, but has absorbed secrets hidden beneath its surface." "Preposterous!" Worthington's voice faltered, a flash of anger illuminating his pale complexion. What could possibly lie beneath a mere chair? Miss Marple's lips curled in a knowing smile. An entire world of truth, dear Worthington, if only you have the courage to explore it. As she deftly examined the seat's edges, revealing the frayed threads beneath, she felt the weight of their collective eyes, suspicion thickening the air, weaving a tapestry of quiet hostility. Everyone wore masks of propriety, yet she sensed the flickers of their true selves, yearning to escape. Perhaps it's time, she mused, to divulge the full meaning behind this concealed narrative. The shadows of doubt danced across the room once more, but Miss Marple held fast to the thread of impulse drawn from the depth of her years. You see, this chair was deliberately placed here, an anchor amid conversations that rumble with ambition, a repository for whispers both vile and personal. You accuse without evidence, Millicent exclaimed, desperation clawing at her tone, her face tightening, flushed with indignation. Yet, beneath the surface, Miss Marple spotted cracks in Millicent's facade, a twinge of fear that preceded ugly truths, and her heart knew it must be pursued. Accusation stems from observation, Millicent, and precedence of motive, she pursued, her eyes narrowing upon the woman with precision. Your anxiety regarding Lady Parker reveals much about your own entanglements. The atmosphere grew thick, taut, as fragile as the fine china gracing the mantelpiece. If Lady Parker had intended to reveal something damning, Miss Marple's instincts thrummed, a discontent that must fester in the corners of the evening. You confided in Henry, did you not? She pressed on, threading the tension further. It was an affair cloaked in shadows, an affair that could ruin reputations. Millicent's marbled complexion paled as the cloak of pretense slipped. How dare you? She gasped, yet each blustered syllable betrayed vulnerability, twining itself tighter around the impending confrontation. Henry meant nothing to me. But Lady Parker knew differently, Miss Marple insisted, pressing her advantage, savoring the scrutiny that enveloped them. She sought to protect you, but someone feared her coming revelations more than mere embarrassment. That someone, Miss Marple's voice dropped, drawing them in like moths to a flame, stands among us. A bead of sweat glistened on Worthington's temple, his composure folding beneath itself. This is madness, he growled. We should not be dissecting our relationships like this. Who stands to gain from such vile taunts? It is not idle gossip, Lord Worthington. It is the essence of the truth, Miss Marple replied, her patience wearing thin. The predator hides in plain sight, while we delude ourselves into believing a vague camaraderie shields us. Suddenly, a crash resounded from beyond the room, sending the guests screaming in panic. Miss Marple instinctively turned as shadows shifted in the doorway, framing the dark outline of the masked figure from earlier. Now, shall we play another round? A voice slithered through the air, sultry and sinister. He's back, Millicent shrieked, her earlier fear morphing into unbridled terror as she stumbled against the edge of the chair. What does he want from us? You're toying with lives. Nay, the figure replied, stepping into the half-light, revealing a glint of the dagger in its grip. I merely wish to unwind the threads this lady there has spun from ignorance. With a sudden lunge, the figure attempted to approach Lady Parker's chair. But Miss Marple lunged forward, pulling Millicent down beside her, hiding them behind the chair's embrace. Quick, if you have something to divulge, do it now, she shouted above the din, urgency choking her voice as the figure's chilling gaze swept the room. Time stilled, breaths caught in throats, heartbeats echoed in the surrounding silence. It was a brief moment of respite before the door slammed shut behind them, thrusting them all into a shrouded confrontation of darkness, between lies crammed within the worn cushions of shame and the tick-tock of fate looming ever nearer. "Miss Marple," Lord Worthington hissed, panic bubbling over. "What do we do?" She turned toward him, her resolve unyielding. "We unravel the truth once and for all. But beware, the real danger resides where we least expect it." At that moment, shadows stirred dangerously close, and Miss Marple's heart dropped as grim realization formed a fiery pit in her stomach. The truth was a double-edged sword, and someone was poised to strike. A hurried footfall echoed behind her, and with horror she turned, catching a fleeting figure slipping into the very depths of the cloak once again. The final threads of her pursuit clenched tightly within the confines of the night. "Wait!" she shouted, propelled in a last surge of desperation. Only the muffled laughter responded, layered, hallowed, and twisting, spiraling into the uncertainty of impending doom as she realized a soul had vanished into the shadows of Lavender Hall, perhaps forever. The clock struck ominously, signifying the witching hour. As thunder reverberated around them, the final hour was upon them, a culmination of secrets begging for release. Time ceased its march, suspended in a breath mingling with the heavy air. None would escape unscathed. The feeble moments of truth awaited their reveal.